Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We've made it through the first couple months of the season to December 2nd. Blackhawks having a surprisingly robust season so far. 11-9-2 record, 24 points. We're on the outside looking in for the playoff race, but just barely. And given that our goal this year is only to not finish in last, it's been reasonably successful so far. Hasn't been great on the ice, and we're still dealing with a roster that is generally relatively old and not all that great. We did re-sign Patrick Kane to a 4-year extension, so he's going to be our cornerstone of our team for hopefully the remainder of his career. Likely we'll be moving on from Jonathan Toews, who's looking for big money, and at this point in his career is not the player that he once was, although still one of the better players on our teams. On our team, we have both him and left defenseman Jake McCabe on the trade block. So far, haven't received any interesting offers on either of them. Certainly, with his contract, it's going to be difficult to trade away Toews at any point, but if we can figure out something as we get closer to the trade deadline, or if someone comes at us with an interesting offer, it's definitely something that we'll have to think about. Blackhawks are doing pretty well financially so far. Continue to sell out the United Center on a regular basis, which has allowed us financially to be in a improving situation. We're generating decent number of points every month that hopefully when we get to the annual budget next year, we'll be able to invest in potentially some type of improvement for the team. Don't need to be spending a ton of money on promotions, so when we get to the budget for the month of January, if we keep selling out, may pare that back a little bit. But we're doing what we can to scout as effectively as possible, keep team morale up a bit. As far as team harmony, definitely a few things that we need to be thinking about for the long term. Have a number of unpopular players on the team, along with the outspoken Ian Mitchell and the disruptive Alex Formenton. So far, no big problems in terms of conflicts or cliques have arisen, and we are harmonious at this point, so things are generally going well. We'll see if we can keep the locker room happy. We'll see if we can keep playing decent hockey. We do have 2 number 1 picks for the draft next year, which should help us. Haven't checked in recently on. Let's pretend we're going to make an offer for this guy here. I forget. I think it might be the Tampa Bay pick. Yeah, it is the Lightning's pick and our own pick. So haven't looked at where the Lightning are, but my assumption is they're doing pretty well in the standings. Actually, not great. They're worse than us with 22 points. So they are also on the outside looking in of the playoff race. So if they end up not making the playoffs this year, even better for us to have two potential picks near the top of the draft as we try to rebuild this team. We talked in our last episode, the roster is not really all that good. And we also don't really have a ton of quality players even under contract. You start looking at the guys who are down in the AHL or the ECHL, and there's some prospects, but they're not necessarily top-end prospects. And we just don't have a ton of organizational depth. Obviously, down the line, we're expecting players like Reichel and Doc, Korsinski and Allen to be big components of our team. But all of them are probably a year, 2 years away from being significant contributors. But they are the players that we're going to be hopefully building this thing around for many years to come. And we've made it to mid-December. The results this month have definitely been mixed. Started out with a couple losses to the Islanders and the Rangers, but then we did beat the Devils on the road to salvage that time in the New York metro area. Lost to Winnipeg and Washington, and then we just won against the Vegas Knights. Headed to Minnesota today, and then you can see we've got nice long homestand for a week with the Rangers, Nashville, and Columbus before going on the road after Christmas to Carolina, St. Louis, and Columbus to finish out 2022. Checking in because we do have a couple players coming back off the injured list today. Alex Formenton, who we picked up on waivers from Ottawa, has been pretty productive for us. 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points in the 19 games he played before he got banged up. 23-year-old, one of the higher potential players on the team. Unfortunately, as you may remember from the team harmony situation, he is a bit of a disruptive force, but he also is a productive player. I don't think we want to do anything as far as moving on from him. Tyler Johnson is kind of a different case. He's a 32-year-old. He's going to be making $4.75 million next year. Salary cap number is $5 million. So he's an expensive player. He's still a respectable NHL player, clearly strong mentally, pretty good physical ratings, not a ton of strength, but good at face-offs, good at hitting. The rest of his defense is kind of middle of the road, and a decent offensive player. You know, over the course of his career, he's had some pretty decent seasons. You can see 24 goals, 29 goals, 21 goals, 29 goals back in his time with the Lightning, but it seems like his time as a big-time goal scorer is probably up. He's definitely better than some of the players that we're playing at right wing and center right now, but I just don't think he is necessarily a big part of our future. So when we try to decide how we're going to make 2 spots on the 23-man roster to get Formenton and Johnson back, we're definitely going to make 1 spot for Formenton. There is a chance that we'll try to shop Tyler Johnson if we think it's just time to move on from the aging player. Just check in on team harmony, and he's actually an unpopular player, so the fact that he's getting up in years and he's also unpopular probably means it's time to move on from him if we can get anything decent in return. And there's really not much of a market for Johnson. Can get a 6th rounder back from either the Lightning or Vegas are the only offers we got when we shopped him. Taking a look at the standings, clearly would prefer the Lightning's pick. They've got 26 points. Vegas has 32 right now. Obviously, a lot of that time for that to change. We're only about 35-40% of the way through the season for most teams, so still potential that the Vegas pick could be more valuable than the Tampa Bay pick, but it's a 6th round pick. It's not a difference maker one way or the other. I think what we may do is take a look at Vegas and Tampa Bay, see if they have anything a little more interesting than a 6th round pick in their system, and maybe we can package somebody else in addition to Tyler Johnson in a trade with one of those teams to move on from an older player who's making a decent amount of money and hopefully bring something a little more valuable than a 6th round pick back in return. And there's honestly just not a lot out there that we're going to get for Tyler Johnson. But I do think it makes sense to get his salary off of the books more so for next year than this year. It gives us a little more flexibility if there are any interesting free agents or any trades where we need to take on some salary. So we're going to go ahead and complete that trade. Gives us a extra 6th round pick in the draft this coming season, and puts us in a bit better situation as far as our salary. Not that we're anywhere near the cap right now anyways, but Tyler Johnson was not a long-term answer to the rebuild on this team. Gets rid of one of the unpopular players, and we got something back in return. Probably could have gotten more for him, but at this point I think it just made sense to move on. And the Rangers are reportedly shopping Adam Fox. Don't really understand why. I would think that if I was a team like the Rangers that was in a battle for first place in their division, that I would keep an outstanding 24-year-old defenseman around. But I can't imagine we're going to be able to put a package together that will be interesting to the Rangers, but I'm certainly going to try. Not surprisingly, we were not able to figure out anything with the Rangers as far as Adam Fox. We offered them 4 first-rounders as well as a pretty good player to help them this year, and that was not even within sniffing distance of what they were looking for. So clearly, if we could have gotten him for some kind of reasonable or bargain price, would have been a way to really jumpstart our rebuild, but there's not really anything practically we can do when we offer them four number 1 picks plus one of the best players we have. Not surprising, actually, that we couldn't piece something together. It would be weird if they end up trading him away when they are a team that's trying to win right now. It would be very strange. If you're wondering, we're playing with the harder trade setting, so it's possible that if we were playing on a different trade setting, we might have been able to get Fox for somewhat less, but that's not the way we're rolling this year. And there's a mildly interesting player on waivers, Connor Clifton from the Bruins. Very good defenseman. Obviously not good enough for them. He's only on a 1-year contract at this point, not making a ton of money. I think we are going to put in a claim for him because we did lose defenseman Ian Mitchell to whiplash for 2 to 3 weeks. We've still got Bowden out with that torn labrum for another 1 to 2 weeks. So we could definitely use a little help at defense. And I think if the claim for Clifton goes through, it's not a long-term commitment, but someone who gives us a little more depth. We called up Jack Rathbone back from Rockford, where he spent most of this year. He was on the NHL roster for a few days earlier in the season, but did not get into any games. And our claim for Clifton did go through. It might not be the worst thing to have a solid defensive defenseman after we just got beat 5-0 by Carolina, who is a team that's actually pretty close to us in the standings. Actually, they've got the same number of points as we do after they just beat us. So definitely can use some help, the blue line. And with Clifton on board, thank you, Mr. Rathbone, but you are going to be headed back down to Rockford. And a nice performance by Patrick Kane, natural hat trick and a 3-1 victory over Columbus to finish off 2022 for us. So that was very good to see. Taves is still outselling Kane as far as his jerseys for the Blackhawks. Not surprisingly, the goalies Mrazek and Stolars, and then Seth Jones also in the top 5. Take a look at our development report. Generally, people moving in the right direction, which shouldn't be surprising. I would think that with the number of aging players we have, there would be some guys kind of moving in the wrong direction, and there are. A couple of our goalies, of course, Mrazek and then Stalock, who we have at Rockford right now. No Blackhawks among the top 20 selling jerseys in the NHL. And our young center, Cole Gutman, who was up a little bit with us a couple of stints earlier this year, Player of the Month in the AHL. So that's positive. He is not a huge big time prospect, but I think certainly somebody who will be getting more action with the Blackhawks in the years to come. And as we get ready to do our monthly budget, we're still selling out every game at the United Center. So from my perspective, I just had did I not? Well, that's kind of a bummer. I clicked off of the set your monthly budget. Oh, now I'm simulating to the next monthly budget. So that's not good at all. I was going to cut our promotional spend a little bit because we're selling out every game. Don't really need to spend those extra points on it. But when I clicked off to show you that our attendance was still at full capacity every game, apparently I lost my chance to do that. And now I've clicked ahead to sim through to the next month, which I clearly do not want to do right now. But hopefully it will stop the sim at some point. Good news is we beat the Blue Jackets as well as the Sharks in each of our last 2 games. So playing a little bit better hockey here. You can see up to 17, 16, and 3. And we're not just ahead of the Coyotes, who are the worst team in hockey. We are also ahead of the Stars in the Central Division now. We are definitely falling out of the playoff race. It was interesting at the beginning of the month when we were still within a good game or two of potentially being a playoff team, but I really did not ever expect that that was going to be the case. So not shocking that we're kind of dropping out of the playoff race at this point. I don't know how many years we are away from being competitive. A lot depends on what we're able to bring in on the draft this coming season. Probably not going to be anyone who's an immediate help to us, but we do have some good young prospects in the system also that should be getting closer to being able to help at the NHL level. And then the opportunity to actually have a full off season to really start shaping this roster the way that we want it to be will be a big help. Obviously, we just started this sim. We were right at the beginning of the preseason. The roster largely was what the roster largely was, but the opportunity to kind of fix that and start building the team the way that we want to this next off season is going to be a big asset to us. Clearly, we need to upgrade at goaltender. And I think we also need to hopefully add some defensemen that can really help us. See what ownership thinks of how the season is going so far. They're satisfied with our performance. They know that we're rebuilding. Fans are satisfied. Not at a stage where they're thinking about replacing us yet. Well, that's kind of a bit of faint praise there. Take a look at team harmony. Still pretty harmonious. May have to make some moves eventually. Athanasiou is a player that we've got to figure out what to do with. His contract going to be up after this year. He's looking for $3.7 million. When you look at his skill set with some of his physical abilities, the speed and the acceleration, shooting accuracy, is good at getting open, good offensive read. Seems like he should still be a very effective offensive player. But he's only scored 13 points in 30 games, and he's minus 15 in his plus-minus. So I'm questioning what we want to do with him. The price doesn't seem unreasonable to me, but the performance on the ice leaves a little bit to be desired, and he's also unpopular with his teammates. So he's someone that we're going to need to figure out what to do with going forward. Player who might have some trade value if we decided to trade him before he hit free agency. The other thing to just check in on is our job security, and we're kind of about where we started the season. We started at 70. When we picked up Stolars on waivers, signed Patrick Kane to that contract, that helped. And since then, it's been a lot of win one, lose one. So it makes sense we're about here. We also did take a hit when we traded away Tyler Johnson for that 6th round pick. our job security is actually kind of moving in a not so great direction, which is not optimal. Season objective was not last, and we are 17 points away from being in last. You would think that is a first-year general manager coach on a team that was pretty miserable last year. We're definitely going to put up more points this year than the Blackhawks did last season, that would be viewed as progress. But apparently our leash is relatively short. And as we get ready to begin the month of January, but also to finish this episode, getting close to having Taylor Radish back from that ruptured Achilles, as well as Bowden from that torn labrum. Mitchell also just a couple weeks away at this point. So for the first time all season, we may be relatively healthy in a week or two, but there's obviously potential for something else to happen that's not so positive on that front over the next couple of weeks before we get all of those players back. What we've got to keep doing is thinking hard, over the next month and a half or so before we get to the trade deadline about who we need to move on from, who we want to put on the trade block, and if we're not going to put some of these players who have only 1 year left on their contract on the trade block, and we want to make a commitment to them, maybe put some offers out to those players and try to get the ones that we think are going to be part of our future signed. So we're going to focus on those things in our next episode, but quite honestly, the season is going about as well as I could have expected it to. I feel pretty confident that we're not going to be in last place because the Coyotes are just brutal at this point. And hopefully we can do enough to keep our job and get into our first full off season this spring and summer, as I was talking about earlier. I think that will be the real opportunity for us to start reshaping this team in our image with a little more goaltending and a little more strength on the blue line. So we will focus on our plans around that in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.